What the What, where we highlight the latest news and happenings in Alabama that's impacting you, your neighbor, your neighbor's neighbor, basically your front door. What the What is brought to you by Alabama Values, a communications hub that uses media and visual stories to raise awareness around civic participatory activities and to inform you of the ways that you can get involved to build a better Alabama, a state that's equitable and inclusive for all Alabamians. So let's dive in. Governor Kay Ivey has called a special session on redistricting starting October 28th, and grassroots and civic organizations throughout the state are urging Alabama's legislators to redraw district lines in a way that ensures fair districts and fair representation for all Alabamians. Now, for those of you who may be wondering, what is redistricting and why should I even care? Don't worry, I got you covered. Now, once every 10 years, Alabama legislators, they come together to draw new district lines based on the census data so that every vote in Alabama has equal weight and all communities have equal access to the decision-making process that determines funding for schools, hospitals, and other essential services that we all need and care about. Redistricting is connected to so many core community issues you may hear about more frequently, such as education. Redistricting directly affects the funding for education. Now, we all want our children to have access to quality education, the most up-to-date academic programming, and activities to help put them ahead and prepare them for their future. Right now, there are 8 school board districts across the state that are racially gerrymandered. These lines uphold segregation and impact what schools get access to what resources. Now, every 4 years, Alabamians have an opportunity to elect state and local school board representatives. Board members are assigned to different voting districts and ultimately make decisions regarding school board policies and funding. You see where I'm going here? Now, the shape and communities that make up those voting districts heavily influences who can be elected to represent the schools in those districts and thus influence the policies and funding decisions. Now, being involved in fair districting and demanding fair maps, it is necessary to ensure that lines aren't drawn in a way that weaken the voting strength of ethnic and racial minorities. Redistricting also directly affects funding for healthcare. We all want access to quality healthcare, right? From the hospitals and specialists. People may not realize how many hospitals are closing in this state. At least 17 hospitals have closed in Alabama since 2010, and many more are at risk of closing. Last year, Crenshaw Community Hospital, the only hospital in Crenshaw County, was at risk of closing. Now, if that would have happened, the average person in the county would have had to drive around 30 minutes to the nearest hospital. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. Let's say that you have asthma, or you may have a child who is suffering from asthma, and you had an emergency that required serious medical attention. That would have meant a 30-minute drive versus a 10-minute drive. That is a huge window that can mean life or death in that situation. Now, while most rural Americans live around 10 and a half miles from the nearest hospital, in Alabama, rural communities often have a 30-minute or more commute to the nearest hospital or just to a doctor's visit. In addition, 7 Alabama counties don't even have hospitals at all. Lowndes County is a prime example of that. Having representation from those who understand our communities gives us a better shot at the much needed healthcare opportunities that we deserve. Redistricting is also connected to criminal justice. Now, Alabama receives an F for its approach to criminal justice. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on poorly ran, overly crowded prisons, where over 50% of those in custody were convicted of drug-related offenses, theft, receiving stolen property, or forgery, which many states are now acknowledging that these offenses are crimes of poverty and substance abuse, and they're working to develop preventative programming and taking a more proactive approach to helping individuals that fall into these categories. categories. Now, in 2020, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against Alabama after deeming that our prison system conditions are just unconstitutional. And in response to that lawsuit, Alabama legislator recently voted to use hundreds of millions of dollars of COVID relief funds to fund building new prisons. Yes, funding that was meant to providing relief for everyday Alabamians dealing with the impact of COVID-19. Our state said, yeah, it's a win-win to use these funds to solve our issues with prisons. What the what? Now, in Alabama, 26.8% of residents are Black, yet Blacks constitute 43% of people in jail and 54% of people in prison, which leads me to the issue of prison gerrymandering, which is the drawing of district lines around prisons. Prison gerrymandering distorts political representation. There is definitely an issue when your body counts, but your vote doesn't. Fair districting and creating legislative districts that respect county lines will increase the diversity among our districts and allow communities to elect candidates to office, adding more diverse perspectives and approach to the criminal justice reform in our state. Think about it. Most importantly, redistricting is connected to representation. Representation matters. Right now in Alabama, the legislature is overwhelmingly white and male. Now, wait a minute. Before you diminish this concern down to just a simple desire to get rid of white elected officials, it is so much deeper than that. Hear me out. It's about having representation that reflects Alabama constituents in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, social economic status. Think about it. Legislators will be tasked with writing, supporting, and passing bills that address constituents' interests. Now, it's past time for Alabama to have a legislative body reflective of the diverse communities in our state. In terms of Alabama, the census data has shown that our state has become more diverse in demographics, which was the case across much of the country. In Alabama, we've seen the most growth amongst people of color. Now, Alabama remains very much a white majority state at 69.1%, but African Americans constitute the largest minority group at 26.8%, Hispanics are 4.6%, Asians at 1.5%, and Native Americans at 7%. And it's time that the lines be drawn in a way to allow people to elect officials reflective of their communities, and not officials electing communities that they desire to serve. That just doesn't make sense. Alabama has a long history of unfair mapping practice that ultimately impacts everyday Alabamians' ability to access resources such as quality health care, education, and public works infrastructure. These unfair mapping practices often impact minority communities by using voter dilution tactics such as cracking, fracking, and packing. Yes, cracking, fracking, packing. It sounds like a nursery rhyme, but it is such a serious matter. Cracking, which is the weakening of the voting power of the opposing party supporters across many districts. Cracking splits groups among multiple districts to weaken their impact and to prevent them from forming a majority. Now, packing gathers members of a group in a single district, thereby allowing the other party to win the remainder of the districts, because the members of the packed group, they have less influence in the rest of the state. Now, you may be wondering how you can get involved with redistricting and stay informed throughout the redistricting process. Follow us on social media and visit us on the web to catch future What the What episodes, follow the latest news and happenings regarding redistricting in the special session, and connect with our partners, organizations on the ground working to fight for fair maps in our state. I'm Anisha. Thank you for watching and tuning in to this episode of What the What. I hope you found it engaging and informative. See you next time.